It started with the sound of keys that didn't belong to me. A metallic jingle right outside my door at 7 in the morning, sharp and deliberate, like someone confident they had every right to be there. I froze halfway through pouring coffee, staring toward the entryway. The handle rattled once, twice, and then came the distinct scrape of a key trying to fit. For half a second I thought maybe my wife had lost her spare again, but then I heard a voice mutter, "Why won't this stupid lock turn?" The voice belonged to none other than Karen Hutchins, the self-appointed queen of our HOA and scourge of anyone who dared to hang a wind chime that disrupted the neighborhood's visual harmony. Karen had always been obsessed with authority. She called herself the resident coordinator, a title she printed on laminated cards for herself. I'd tolerated her emails, her inspection visits, her measuring tape that once appeared on my lawn to verify grass height compliance. But this, trying to open my front door with a key, was a new milestone in insanity. I walked quietly toward the door, listening as she cursed under her breath and tried another key from her jingling ring. There were at least 10 of them. I could hear the metal shift like wind chimes of arrogance. "Come on," she hissed. They said this was the master. That word, master, snapped everything into clarity. HOA Karen had acquired or made herself some sort of master key. I don't know whether she conned a locksmith or just copied one from maintenance access, but she was definitely testing it on my home. My jaw clenched, but I didn't open the door right away. I wanted to see how far she'd go. Through the peephole, I watched her standing there in her neon visor, clipboard tucked under one arm, trying to force a key into my deadbolt. Her lips moved as she read off house numbers to herself like she was on a mission. Then, suddenly the key jammed. She tugged. It didn't move. She tugged harder. The jangle of keys turned frantic. She looked around nervously, then knocked once. "Hello? HOA inspection. Maintenance check." I let her stew for a few seconds before pulling the door open just enough for the security chain to hold. Her eyes widened like she'd seen a ghost. "Oh, Mr. Levin. I was just, verifying entry compliance." "Entry compliance?" I repeated slowly, still half asleep and fully amused. "With a key that's now stuck in my lock?" Karen's smile twitched. "Yes, well, you see, we had reports of someone duplicating keys, and I was just ensuring your door wasn't compromised." I leaned against the doorframe. "By trying to open it yourself?" She gave a tight laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. It was just a check." She yanked at the key again, and it made a dry metallic groan but refused to move. I let her struggle another minute, sipping my coffee through the small opening. "Need help?" "I don't need help," she snapped. "This lock is obviously defective. You should have installed the approved HOA-recommended hardware last quarter." "You mean the ones you sell at triple price through your brother's hardware store?" Her face stiffened. "That's irrelevant." "It's actually quite relevant when you're standing on my porch with your master key jammed in my lock." She tried one more tug, and I heard the satisfying click of the key breaking halfway inside. Her expression melted from irritation to horror. "Oh no, no, no!" She dropped to her knees, squinting at the keyhole. "You have to call a locksmith immediately. This could compromise the entire neighborhood's lock system." "Compromise it how?" I asked. "Because you jammed your illegal master key into it?" That's when she changed tactics. Karen stood up, crossed her arms, and declared, "I'm within my rights as HOA president to conduct safety checks on any entryway visible from the street." "My door isn't visible from the street," I pointed out. "You walked up my private path and tried to open it." She blinked. "Technicalities." At that moment, my 10-year-old son, Noah, shuffled down the hallway in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "Dad, who's yelling?" "Just your favorite neighborhood safety inspector," I said dryly. Karen turned toward the sound, her smile reforming like wet plaster. "Hello, young man. Go tell your father to unlock this chain so I can fix his broken door." Noah squinted at her. "Why is your key stuck in it?" Karen flushed bright red. It's not stuck, it's temporarily lodged. Noah looked at me and whispered, loud enough for her to hear, "Is she breaking in?" "She's trying to ensure compliance," I said, air quoting. That was the final straw for her composure. "You people have no respect for regulations," she snapped. "Do you realize how dangerous it is to have a non-standard lock?" She grabbed her phone and started dialing. I thought maybe she was calling her locksmith. Instead, she said loudly, "Yes, this is an emergency. I'm locked out, well, technically locked in. No, there's a child involved." I couldn't believe it. She was calling 911. Within 10 minutes, 2 patrol cars rolled up. The officers stepped out, looking between us like they'd walked into a sitcom. Karen immediately launched into her speech about unauthorized locks and community safety. The lead officer, a calm man with a mustache that screamed, "Seen it all," listened patiently, then turned to me. "Sir, can you explain what's going on?" I gestured toward the door. "She tried to open my house with a key that's now broken inside the lock." The officer turned back to Karen. "Is that true?" Her voice quivered between arrogance and panic. "I was conducting an HOA inspection. He's using an unapproved locking mechanism that violates neighborhood safety protocol. Do you have authorization to enter his home?" "Well, technically, yes, under Section 14 of the bylaws." "Do you have a warrant?" the officer interrupted. Karen blinked. "What? No, I'm not the police." "Then you can't enter his home, ma'am. Especially not with a key that doesn't belong to you." She started protesting, but Noah beat her to the punch. He walked right up to the door, unlatched the chain, and swung it open. "See? It wasn't even locked from the inside. You didn't need your stupid key." The officers tried not to laugh. I stepped out, crossing my arms. "So, officer, what do you recommend? Should I press charges for attempted entry?" Karen gasped. "You wouldn't dare." "I was trying to help." The mustached officer shrugged. "That's between you two, but I'd advise keeping your keys to your own property." He looked pointedly at Karen's jangling ring, which she hastily shoved into her purse. As they drove off, she turned to me, voice shaking with a mix of fury and humiliation. "You have no idea what you've done. You made me look ridiculous in front of law enforcement." "I didn't make you do anything," I said. "You did that all by yourself." She jabbed a finger toward me. "This isn't over. You're going to regret making a fool of me." I smiled faintly. "I look forward to seeing what compliance looks like next time." She stormed off, heels clicking furiously down the path. The broken half of the key still jutted from my lock like a little silver trophy. Noah laughed quietly. "Can we keep it?" "Oh, we're keeping it," I said, pocketing it. "I have a feeling this is going to come in handy." By the time I replaced the lock that afternoon, word had already spread through the neighborhood. 2 neighbors stopped by, pretending to check their mail, both whispering the same thing. Did Karen really call the cops on herself? I just smiled and said, "You'll have to ask her." But as night fell and the porch light flickered on, I saw something taped to my mailbox, a formal HOA citation, printed in red, accusing me of interfering with authorized community inspections. It was signed in her loopy handwriting, stamped with her self-made seal of authority. That was when I realized. Karen wasn't humiliated. She was gearing up for war. By morning, the HOA citation had turned into a neighborhood spectacle. Karen had taped duplicates of it to my mailbox, my fence post, and even my trash bin. Each copy had the same red lettering, official notice of noncompliance, obstruction of authorized entry. It looked like something between a government summons and a ransom note. I could almost hear her smug satisfaction while she printed it. I took one of the papers and placed it neatly on my kitchen table next to my coffee mug. My wife, Leah, glanced at it, sighed, and said, "She's actually doubling down." "Of course she is," I said. "Karen doesn't lose. She rewrites the rulebook mid-game." By mid-morning, my phone buzzed with an email from the HOA board. Subject line: Incident Review, Unauthorized locking mechanism. The body was short and cold. It said the HOA had received a complaint from the community safety officer about my door and that I was required to attend a compliance hearing at the clubhouse that evening. Leah groaned. She's turning her embarrassment into an official meeting? She's trying to make the cops look like they overreacted, I said. She wants to show the neighborhood she's still in charge. I spent the rest of the day preparing, not by collecting evidence, but by doing something far more subtle. I printed photos of the broken key, screenshots of her email demanding everyone switch to HOA standard locks, and copies of old newsletters where she bragged about the central key program for maintenance access. I wasn't planning to argue. I was planning to let her talk herself into a hole. When I arrived that evening, the clubhouse parking lot was full. Every folding chair inside was occupied by neighbors pretending not to be entertained. Karen sat at the front behind a long table, flanked by two board members who looked more like hostages than colleagues. She wore her usual power outfit, pressed blazer, HOA badge, and a pin that said, "Keeping Communities Safe." "Mr. Levin," she said sweetly when I walked in. "Thank you for joining us. We're here to discuss your non-compliance with entry access policy." I didn't know breaking into my house was an HOA policy, I replied, setting my folder on the table. A few neighbors stifled laughs. Karen's smile flickered. "Let's maintain professionalism. The issue is your door lock. It's incompatible with the master key system used for emergency maintenance and safety checks." "You mean the system where you carry a ring of keys and test them on people's doors at 7 in the morning?" She ignored the jab. "This key system was approved last year to ensure emergency personnel can access homes if needed." I flipped open a newsletter from that year. "This one? The one that says, optional for residents who opt into the community security network? The one you printed yourself before any vote took place?" Karen's pen froze midair. "That's outdated documentation. From 6 months ago," I said, sliding the page toward her. "It also says the HOA assumes no responsibility for key management or liability for misuse." There was a ripple through the audience. One of the board members cleared his throat and said, "Karen, I wasn't aware we ever approved mandatory participation." Karen's smile stiffened into something plastic. "It was an emergency provision." "During what emergency?" someone in the back asked. She looked ready to burst. "The emergency of non-compliant locks. Some of us take safety seriously." That was the moment the board member on her right whispered something, and the room started buzzing. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. Karen's need to dominate every conversation was doing all the work. By the end of the meeting, the board voted to temporarily suspend the master key program pending review. Karen's face had turned the color of raw brick. She adjourned the meeting abruptly, muttering about procedural sabotage, as everyone filed out. As I walked toward my car, a few neighbors stopped to quietly thank me. One even whispered, "She tried my door last month too." I thought I was going crazy. That small admission told me everything. Karen had been testing her keys all over the neighborhood, convinced she was the gatekeeper of everyone's property. I wasn't her only target, just the first one who caught her in the act. That night, while locking up, I found a folded note wedged under my doormat. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need to guess. The handwriting was unmistakable, tight, looping cursive with too many underlines. It read, "Tampering with community systems is a violation of HOA Code 3.4. You've made this personal. Don't test me." I showed it to Leah, who frowned. "She's not going to stop, is she?" "No," I said. "But she just lost her leverage. So she's going to look for new weapons." And she did. 2 days later, a man in a reflective vest showed up in my driveway with a clipboard. He introduced himself as a safety contractor hired by the HOA. He claimed he was there to inspect my property for structural hazards. I asked for ID. He didn't have any. I asked for a permit. He said Karen told him verbal authorization was enough. That was when I realized she was now outsourcing her harassment. I politely told him to leave, then called the city building department. They confirmed no inspections had been scheduled. 30 minutes later, the contractor sped off when a city inspector car pulled up. Leah shook her head. She's actually breaking laws now. She's desperate to reassert control, I said. People like Karen don't recover from public humiliation, they double down until they implode. That afternoon, I decided to start playing defense more strategically. I installed a doorbell camera, set motion alerts for the driveway, and put up a discreet sign. Property monitored for legal protection. I didn't write security, I wrote legal protection. I wanted her to know exactly how I thought. Sure enough, that evening, Karen came strutting down the sidewalk with her clipboard, pretending to measure hedges. She paused when she saw the camera lens blink. For the first time since I'd known her, she hesitated. She stared straight into the camera, smirked, and mouthed something that looked a lot like "we'll see." Then she turned and walked away. 3 days later, another HOA notice appeared, this time citing me for unauthorized recording devices visible from public walkways. I almost laughed. She was now trying to outlaw my camera for catching her snooping. I didn't remove it. Instead, I sent the board a copy of the city's ordinance explicitly allowing cameras for residential protection. Then I added a screenshot of Karen's last inspection with the caption, documenting ongoing harassment for potential restraining order. That must have hit a nerve because the next morning, I got an apologetic email from one of the other board members saying they were reviewing the legality of her new citations. Translation: they were starting to realize she was a liability. But Karen wasn't done. Later that week, while I was at work, Leah called me in a panic. "There's someone at the door," she whispered. "They're saying they're with the fire department. They're asking to inspect the house for emergency access points." My stomach sank. Did they have a city vehicle? No, just a white van with a magnet sticker that says Community Safety. "Don't open the door," I said immediately. "Call the real fire department and ask if they sent anyone." 10 minutes later, the real department confirmed no such inspection existed. By the time officers arrived, the van was gone. But my doorbell camera had caught everything. The same van, the same fake sticker, and a woman in a neon visor standing 50 feet away pretending to walk her dog. Karen. That night, I printed out the footage and placed it neatly in a folder labeled Incident 2. I wasn't ready to go nuclear yet, but I wanted a paper trail. When I stepped outside the next morning, my lawn was covered in flyers. Each one bore the HOA logo and read, "Unsafe home practices threaten neighborhood harmony. Attend a safety demonstration this Saturday." And at the bottom, in bold, "Hosted by Karen Hutchins, HOA President." She was trying to rally the neighborhood against me. I stared at the flyers scattered across my wet grass like propaganda confetti. I didn't pick them up right away. I just smiled, because I'd already decided how this next round would play out. If she wanted a demonstration, she was going to get one, just not the kind she expected. Saturday arrived bright, loud, and humid, the kind of morning where even the air seemed impatient. By 9 a.m., half the cul-de-sac buzzed with folding chairs, banners, and clipboards. Karen's neighborhood safety demonstration looked more like a campaign rally than an educational event. A portable podium stood on her driveway beside a table stacked with glossy pamphlets. Each one featured a picture of Karen smiling like a toothpaste model beneath the slogan, "Securing our homes, securing our future." From my porch I watched her direct volunteers like a general. She wore her signature neon visor and a sash that literally said, "HOA President" in bold gold letters. A small crowd had gathered, families, retirees, and a few curious onlookers who probably came for the free donuts. Every so often she'd glance toward my house, then back at her clipboard, her smile tightening a little more each time. Leah appeared beside me holding a mug. She actually rented a microphone. She's desperate to rebrand herself, I said. This isn't a safety event, it's a redemption tour. Noah, my 10-year-old, peered through the window blinds. Dad, she put your picture on that board. He wasn't exaggerating. On the easel next to her podium was a poster showing a blurry still from my doorbell camera. The caption read, "Non-compliant home setup. Learn from mistakes." Leah's jaw dropped. That's illegal, right? Not exactly, I said. But it's about to become the worst mistake she's made yet. I'd been preparing since Thursday. While she organized her demonstration, I contacted the actual fire department, the police community liaison, and even the city code enforcement officer. I told them there was an unauthorized public safety event being held under false pretenses, potentially misrepresenting city programs. They thanked me for the heads up. I didn't know if they'd come, but if they did, I wanted them to see it firsthand. At 10 sharp, Karen tapped her mic, smiled theatrically, and announced, "Good morning, responsible homeowners." A weak chorus of greetings followed. Today we'll discuss how proper compliance keeps everyone safe. Recent incidents have shown what happens when individuals ignore community protocols. Her eyes darted directly to me. Certain residents have resisted emergency access measures, endangering us all. I leaned against my porch rail, hands in pockets, the picture of calm. She thrived on reaction, and silence was my favorite weapon. She launched into a presentation full of fabricated statistics about lock delays during emergencies. At one point she gestured to her board. For example, this footage, courtesy of a community source, shows how unauthorized locks can trap residents inside. The crowd murmured. A few people frowned, recognizing my house. I didn't move. Then she called up a volunteer to demonstrate the proper door hardware. It was an absurd skit involving a fake doorframe and a giant gold key. The spectacle might have worked, if not for the timing. A city truck pulled onto the street. 2 uniformed inspectors stepped out, followed by a police cruiser. Conversations died mid-sentence. Karen's smile froze like wax under sunlight. One inspector raised a clipboard. "Good morning. Which of you is hosting this public event?" Karen cleared her throat. "That would be me, Karen Hutchins, HOA president. We're demonstrating community safety compliance." "Did you receive a temporary event permit?" the inspector asked. Her face went pale. "This is private property." "Yes, but the flyer lists it as a public demonstration sponsored by the Homeowners Association," he replied. "That requires city approval." A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. I heard someone mutter, "She never got permission?" Karen tried to laugh. "It's a misunderstanding. We're just educating our neighbors." The police officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, we've also received a report of unauthorized use of surveillance images belonging to another resident. Are you distributing those?" She stammered. "That's part of the educational display." "That's not educational," the officer said dryly. "That's a privacy violation." Every head turned toward me. I simply raised my coffee in salute. Karen's composure crumbled. "He set this up," she shouted suddenly, pointing at me. "He's been conspiring to discredit the HOA." The officer remained calm. "Ma'am, we're just here to clarify compliance. If you continue this event without authorization, we'll have to ask everyone to disperse." Her volunteers began awkwardly folding chairs. The neighbors, sensing drama fatigue, drifted away. In less than 10 minutes, Karen's grand showcase deflated into a half-empty driveway littered with pamphlet. As the officials left, she turned toward me with a look that could peel paint. "You think you've won something?" "I didn't have to win," I said. "You just keep forfeiting." She stormed inside, slamming her door hard enough to rattle the mailboxes. By afternoon the cul-de-sac had gone eerily quiet. The only sound was the faint whir of sprinklers. Leah exhaled slowly. "That was brutal." "She needed to be stopped publicly," I said. "But this won't end her obsession. It'll just redirect it." I was right. That evening, I got a message from an unknown number. Enjoy your little victory. Let's see how long your record stays clean. Leah wanted to call the police, but I recognized the handwriting in the attached image of a letter. It was Karen's looping cursive again. She'd taken the HOA war into a new phase: paperwork sabotage. Within a week, I received 3 separate complaints from different municipal departments. One alleged my fence violated setback rules. Another claimed my solar panels were installed without approval. The third accused me of improper waste disposal. Each came with attached photos of my property, clearly taken from Karen's sidewalk vantage point. I spent hours cross-checking permits and emailing departments. Each one confirmed the complaints were baseless, but it took time. Karen wasn't trying to win legally. She was trying to drown me in red tape. One afternoon, while filing yet another response, Noah peeked into my office. "Dad, why is she doing this?" "Because people like Karen can't handle losing control," I said. "When they can't win the rules, they weaponize the rules." He thought about it for a moment. "So what are you gonna do?" I smiled. "Something she'll never expect: follow the rules perfectly." That night, I compiled every HOA regulation, every bylaw, every municipal code cross-referenced with it. Then I spent the weekend making sure my property was a textbook example of compliance. Paint color, hedge height, mailbox angle, even the spacing between fence slats. If there was a standard, I met it. If there wasn't, I found one. On Monday, I invited the actual HOA board for an open property walkthrough. They looked bewildered but curious. As we walked, I narrated every detail with cheerful precision. Notice the compliant gate latch height, the certified lock model, the trimmed hedges under 18 inches. By the end, one board member actually laughed. "This place could be used for training new inspectors." I smiled. "That's the plan. I'll be submitting it for the annual HOA Exemplary Property Award." They left impressed. An hour later, Karen's car rolled by slowly. She saw the board shaking my hand and nearly stalled her SUV. Leah chuckled. "You're feeding her paranoia." "I'm giving her the one thing she hates most: documentation she can't twist." That evening, another note appeared under my doormat. This one was scrawled, messy, the ink smudged from rage. "You think you're smarter than everyone, but I make the rules here." For the first time, I realized how unstable she'd become. The performative arrogance had cracked into genuine obsession. I installed 2 more cameras, one facing the street and one pointed at the side gate. Not to provoke her, just to have evidence if things got darker. And then, 2 nights later, the cameras caught something unexpected. Around midnight, a figure crept up to my door, crouched, and fiddled with the handle. The porch light clicked on automatically, and the figure bolted, but not before the lens captured a clear shot of a familiar neon visor glinting in the light. Karen. I filed the footage into my growing folder marked Incidents. I didn't send it to police yet. I wanted one more piece, something undeniable. The next morning, she acted as though nothing had happened. She waved cheerfully from across the street while walking her dog. But her eyes had that wild gleam, the kind that said she was planning something bigger, something final. Leah watched her disappear around the corner. "She's unraveling." "Good," I said quietly. "People who unravel eventually hang themselves with their own thread." I didn't know yet that her next stunt would involve calling 911 again, and this time, she'd bring the entire neighborhood with her. The next Saturday began with sirens, again. But this time, they weren't faint or distant. They screamed right up our street, echoing off garage doors. I walked onto my porch still in my robe, coffee mug in hand, and saw 2 patrol cars, an ambulance, and a small crowd of neighbors gathering like moths to chaos. At the center of it all, standing in my driveway, was Karen Hutchins, waving her arms frantically at the officers. "She's actually doing this again," Leah muttered beside me, tying her robe. "What now?" Karen spotted us and jabbed a finger toward my door. "That's the house. The one with the unsafe locking system. There's a child trapped inside." For a second I thought she'd lost her mind entirely. Trapped? I echoed, walking forward. Karen, my son is at his friend's sleepover. There's no one inside. That's what you want them to think, she cried. I heard a noise, someone calling for help. The door wouldn't open. I tried the master key again, and it jammed. You tried another key? I cut in sharply. The officers exchanged looks. One of them asked, "Ma'am, you tried to enter his house again?" Karen's tone dropped to a self-righteous pitch. "For safety reasons. The HOA has emergency protocols. That child could be in danger." Leah crossed her arms. "You mean the child who's at a sleepover 2 miles away?" The officer sighed. "All right, let's verify. Sir, can we check the house just to confirm no one's inside?" "Of course," I said calmly. "You can come with me." I unlocked the door in plain view, letting both officers step inside. We walked through every room. The house was spotless, silent, utterly normal. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator. When we returned to the porch, Karen was pacing like a wind-up toy about to explode. "Well?" she demanded. The officer looked at her evenly. "Ma'am, the house is empty. There's no emergency." "That's impossible," she said. Someone screamed, "I heard it." Leah raised an eyebrow. "Maybe it was your conscience." The neighbors chuckled. Karen's face flushed crimson. "You people think this is funny? You think safety is a joke?" The officer held up a hand. "Ma'am, this is your second false report involving this address. We'll have to document this as a misuse of emergency services." Her voice rose to a shrill pitch. "I'm the HOA president. You can't treat me like a criminal." The officer's patience finally thinned. "Title or not, you don't have authority to enter private property or call 911 for imaginary emergencies." I stepped forward, speaking softly but clearly. "Officer, would you like to see footage of her attempting to open my door again last week? It's time-stamped." Karen's eyes widened. "You're recording me?" "Yes," I said. "For legal protection. The footage shows you trespassing at midnight." The officer glanced between us. "Sir, please email that to our department." "Ma'am, I strongly advise you to stop contacting emergency services unless there's a real emergency." The crowd murmured as the patrol cars rolled away. Karen stood in the middle of my driveway, trembling, not with fear but with humiliation so deep it looked physical. I expected her to retreat. Instead, she turned to the neighbors and shouted, "You're all blind. He's manipulating you. He's dangerous." Then she pointed at my cameras. "He's spying on everyone. That's what those are for." It was surreal watching her unravel in real time. One neighbor, Dan from across the cul-de-sac, folded his arms. "Karen, those cameras saved your dog last winter when it got out. Remember? He's not spying, he's just tired of you." Another neighbor muttered, "Maybe the HOA needs new leadership." Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stood there frozen for a few seconds before storming off, her visor bobbing like a flag of retreat. Leah exhaled slowly. "That was the loudest self-destruction I've ever witnessed." "Not yet," I said. "She still has her paper empire. She'll try one last administrative strike before this is over." I was right again. That evening, an email landed in every homeowner's inbox. Subject: Urgent, special meeting regarding neighborhood safety. It accused me of endangering the community through illegal surveillance, intimidation tactics, and non-compliant property modifications. The meeting was scheduled for Sunday evening in the clubhouse. Karen had effectively summoned the entire HOA to put me on trial. Leah groaned. "She just won't stop." "She can't afford to stop," I said. "Her control depends on everyone believing her authority is legitimate. The moment they see through her, she's done." So I prepared. Not with anger, but precision. I compiled a timeline, dates, emails, citations, and video stills. I even included her fake contractor and the note she'd slipped under my mat. I printed everything on crisp white paper, organized in labeled folders. If she wanted a courtroom, I'd give her one. When Sunday arrived, the clubhouse was packed. Every seat filled, every conversation buzzing. Karen stood at the front, posture rigid, face powdered into a mask of authority. She began without preamble. This meeting concerns an ongoing threat to our neighborhood's harmony. Mr. Levin has repeatedly undermined HOA safety initiatives, recorded residents without consent, and harassed board officials. She gestured to me dramatically, as though unveiling a villain. We have witnesses, documentation, and a duty to restore order. I waited until she finished her opening tirade before standing slowly. Can I respond? She hesitated. Briefly. Thank you, I said, and walked to the front carrying my folders. Neighbors, I'd like to clarify some things. I set the folders on the table, opened one, and held up a printed email. Karen's own message from months ago about her master key safety system. This email encouraged residents to give her duplicate keys. No official vote was held. That was her initiative alone. Someone in the crowd muttered, I got that email too. I continued. Next, here's a police report from last weekend confirming her false 911 call and the city's warning about misuse of emergency services. Karen started to speak, but I kept going. Here's footage of her on my porch at midnight, trying to open my door. And here's the city ordinance confirming personal security cameras are fully legal. I laid out each document calmly, one after another, until the table looked like a crime scene made of paperwork. The crowd had gone dead silent. Karen's hands trembled. You can't just, this is harassment. No, Karen, I said quietly. This is transparency. The HOA vice president cleared his throat. Mrs. Hutchins, is any of this untrue? She sputtered. It's being misrepresented. He's twisting it. Then perhaps we should verify, he said, taking the papers. The room watched him read in silence. When he finally looked up, his voice was steady. These look legitimate. Murmurs rose again. Someone whispered, she's been doing this for years. The vice president turned to the crowd. All in favor of suspending Mrs. Hutchins pending investigation? Hands shot up like fireworks. Karen's voice cracked. You can't vote me out. The vice president replied calmly, we just did. She stood frozen, face drained of color. Then, without a word, she grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the clubhouse door so hard it echoed. Leah slipped her hand into mine. That was surgical. I didn't need revenge, I said softly. I just needed the truth to talk. Louder than her lies. But as the meeting dispersed and people congratulated me, I couldn't shake one uneasy thought. Karen wasn't the kind of person who accepted defeat quietly. That night, as we settled in, I checked the porch camera out of habit. At first, the feed was blank. Then static flickered. The timestamp glitched, and the image turned black. My stomach dropped. I went outside and found the small camera lens smashed clean through, wires cut. Leah gasped when she saw it. She wouldn't dare. She would, I said grimly. And she just did. I called the non-emergency police line and filed a report, attaching earlier footage as evidence. But even as I sent it, I knew Karen wasn't done. She had lost her title, her influence, and her dignity, and people like her always needed someone to blame. The next morning, a new HOA notice appeared on every door, unsigned but unmistakably hers. It read, Unauthorized homeowners have compromised neighborhood unity. Further action will be taken. I didn't laugh this time, because buried beneath the pettiness was something new, something unstable. And by the end of that week, I'd realized just how far Karen was willing to go to get her master key back. For 3 days, the neighborhood existed in an uneasy quiet. No meetings, no flyers, no midnight key tests, just silence. It was unnatural, like the calm between storms. Even the air felt cautious. Leah tried to convince me that Karen had finally burned herself out. I wanted to believe her, But people like Karen didn't burn out. They smoldered until they found dry kindling. The first clue came Tuesday morning. My mail, usually punctual, didn't arrive. When it finally did the next afternoon, half of it was missing: bills, bank letters, an insurance renewal. What remained had been resealed with clumsy tape, edges torn. My postal carrier, a friendly man named Javed, looked apologetic. "Sir, some of your mail was misplaced. Found it near the community board. Someone must have removed it by accident." By accident? Sure. Karen's house stood only 20 feet from that board. Leah's voice sharpened when I told her. "She's tampering with mail now? That's federal." "She's desperate," I said. "Desperation makes people stupid." Still, I filed a report at the post office. It felt ridiculous to be filling out a federal complaint over stolen envelopes, but I wanted a record. Everything documented, dated, traceable. That night, around 11 p.m., Noah came downstairs rubbing his eyes. "Dad, there's someone outside the window." I froze. "Which window?" "The kitchen." I saw a flashlight. Leah gasped, grabbing her phone. I pulled up the new security feed. Thankfully, I'd replaced the smashed porch camera with 2 hidden ones inside the flower bed. The footage loaded grainy at first, then sharpened. A figure crouched near the side of the house, shining a light toward the lock, wearing a dark hoodie, and a familiar pair of white sneakers with neon trim. "Karen." I felt my pulse spike, but I forced calm into my voice. "Stay upstairs," I told them. Then I stepped quietly onto the porch, phone recording. The beam of her flashlight flickered across the doorknob again. "Lose something, Karen?" I said, voice steady. She froze, then straightened slowly, as if emerging from a trance. "You changed the locks again," she said hoarsely. "That tends to happen when someone keeps trying to break in." Her eyes glistened under the porch light, bloodshot, exhausted, furious. "You think you can make a fool of me? You destroyed my reputation. Everyone thinks I'm crazy." I kept my distance. "You did that yourself. You don't understand," she hissed. "This neighborhood used to respect me. They used to listen. Now they laugh behind my back. My phone won't stop ringing. Reporters called." "So your plan is to prove them right?" I said. "Breaking into my house again?" She clenched her fists. "You don't belong here. You and your cameras and your smart locks. This was supposed to be a traditional community. And you're supposed to be sane," I said quietly. "But here we are." She took a shaky breath, eyes darting toward the doorknob like she was still considering forcing it. Then, just as suddenly, she turned and bolted down the walkway, her flashlight bouncing wildly until it disappeared into the dark. I didn't chase her. I didn't even call the police right away. Instead, I uploaded the footage and sent it straight to the HOA vice president, who was now acting chair. His reply came 5 minutes later. "This is more serious than we thought. Leave it to us." The next morning, the board issued a formal restraining order petition on behalf of the HOA, citing harassment, trespassing, and property damage. For once, the entire neighborhood was united, in quiet relief that someone else had finally taken action. Karen's response arrived within hours. She went door to door, knocking on every house in the cul-de-sac, pleading for signatures on a petition to remove tyrannical leadership. No one signed. Not one. I watched from the porch as she moved from driveway to driveway, each conversation shorter than the last. By the time she reached my house, she was shaking. "Happy now," she snapped. "You turned everyone against me." I said nothing. Silence was my final weapon. That night, around sunset, Leah noticed something odd. "The street lights near her house aren't working." I looked out. 3 poles stood dark, the rest of the street glowing orange. "Probably maintenance," I said, but something in my gut twisted. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. The cameras showed Karen again, but this time, she wasn't at my door. She was standing in the middle of the cul-de-sac, holding a flashlight and a ring of keys, screaming at the sky. Her voice echoed through the feed. "You think I'm powerless? You think I can't control my own neighborhood? She shook the keys like a rattle, shouting, "These still mean something? I built this place." Then she turned toward my house. You're the reason this community's falling apart. You and your son and your stupid gadgets. I didn't move. I didn't even turn on the porch light. I wanted her to see only her reflection in the black windows. Within minutes, other neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Dan came out holding his phone. "Karen, go home," he said quietly. She spun on him. "Don't tell me what to do. You're all ungrateful." The flashing red and blue arrived before she could say another word. The same officer with the mustache stepped out, face etched with weary recognition. "Evening again, Mrs. Hutchins." She started to argue, but her words fell apart. He ruined everything. I was just trying to protect us." The officer sighed. "Ma'am, we've had multiple reports tonight. We need you to calm down." "I am calm," she shouted, hurling the key ring onto the pavement. It clattered across the asphalt like loose change. "He's the problem. Arrest him." "I'm standing on my porch," I said quietly. "Unarmed. Filming for safety." Karen stared at me for a long, trembling moment. Then her face crumpled, and she sank to the curb, sobbing. The officer crouched beside her, speaking softly. The paramedics she'd once summoned for fake emergencies now gently helped her to her feet. As they guided her into the ambulance, she looked back at me through the flashing lights. There was no fury left, only a hollow sort of hatred, the kind that comes from realizing the war is over and you've lost. The next morning, the HOA sent an official notice. Effective immediately, Karen Hutchins has been removed from all duties pending medical evaluation. Leah folded the letter quietly. "It's over," she said. But I wasn't celebrating. Because endings aren't always clean. I walked outside, noticing something glinting on the curb. The broken key ring, half the keys bent, one still whole. I picked it up. Among them was a brass tag etched with my address. Leah's voice behind me was soft. "That's hers." "Was," I said. "But I'm keeping it." For 2 weeks, the neighborhood healed. Lawns were trimmed, fences painted, laughter returned to driveways. People spoke to one another again. It was as if the entire street had exhaled after holding its breath for years. Then one evening, Dan stopped by holding his phone. "You should see this," he said, lowering his voice. He showed me a post from the local community Facebook group. It was an open letter, written by Karen from temporary medical leave. It read, "Beware of false neighbors who hide behind technology. They manipulate, record, and destroy everything we've built. I may be gone, but the HOA is eternal." Leah shook her head. "She's still trying to control the narrative." "She always will," I said. "But narratives need audiences, and hers just walked away." That night, I placed the bent keys inside a small box with the broken piece, still lodged from that first morning she tried to open my door. The noise of that jammed key had started everything. It felt poetic to let it end with silence. Or so I thought, until the following week, when a notice arrived from the locksmith company downtown. It was a bill, addressed to me but ordered by Hutchins K. The service description read, "Master key duplication, HOA template restricted copy." The date was 2 days before her breakdown. I stared at it for a long time. Leah read it over my shoulder and whispered, she was making another set. "She never stopped," I said quietly. "She was building a new master key." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid she'd return, but because I finally understood her obsession. It was never about keys or locks or even power. It was about control over chaos. Karen couldn't handle a world that didn't bend to her rules. And when she realized she couldn't unlock mine, she unraveled trying to force it. The next morning, I mailed the locksmith bill to the police department, attached to my statement. The final note read, "In case she tries again." Leah asked softly, "Do you think she will?" I looked out at the quiet street, the trimmed lawns, the faint reflection of sunrise on my new brass lock. If she does, I said, I'll be ready. Because this time, the only thing she'll unlock is her own downfall. But fate had one last twist waiting, a final scene that would play out on a sunny afternoon, in front of everyone, when Karen would return to reclaim her authority, and my son would once again be the one to end it. 3 weeks after her breakdown, the neighborhood had fallen into the most peaceful rhythm it had known in years. Without Karen's constant noise, her memos, her patrols, her obsessive control, the street felt human again. Kids rode bikes, neighbors chatted over hedges, even the mail started arriving on time. I had almost convinced myself it was over. Then one Saturday morning, as I watered the lawn, I saw the one thing I'd prayed never to see again: Karen's silver Lexus creeping down the cul-de-sac. It moved slower than usual, as if testing the ground. She was behind the wheel, sunglasses on, visor gone, hair tied back in a tight ponytail. Her expression wasn't angry, it was calm, eerie even. The kind of calm that meant a storm had just changed shape. Leah stepped onto the porch, freezing when she saw the car. "You've got to be kidding me." "Stay inside," I said quietly. The Lexus rolled to a stop in front of my driveway. The engine idled for a long moment before she finally opened the door and stepped out. No clipboard, no papers, just a single manila envelope clutched in her hand. "Morning, Karen," I said evenly. "You're violating your restraining order." She ignored that. "I came to apologize." That stopped me. "Apologize?" She nodded slowly. "I've had time to think. I wasn't well. I said things, did things I shouldn't have. I've accepted treatment. The HOA is under new leadership, and I wanted to make peace." I didn't trust her, not for a second. But her tone was measured, her hands still. Leah hovered near the doorway, watching every movement. "What's in the envelope?" I asked. "Documents," she said softly. "HOA files. I found them in storage. Records of everyone's key requests, maintenance approvals, votes that never happened. I thought you should have them. You were right all along." I hesitated, then reached out. She stepped forward slowly and handed me the envelope. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something behind the bitterness: exhaustion. Genuine, human exhaustion. "Thank you," I said carefully. She nodded. "You don't have to forgive me. Just don't let them forget who I was before all this." I was about to answer when Noah's voice called from inside. "Dad, someone's at the back door." I turned instinctively. "What?" He ran out, pointing toward the side of the house. "I heard knocking." Leah's face went pale. "The cameras didn't alert." That's when I realized what Karen had done. I spun back toward the Lexus, but she was already climbing into the driver's seat, smirking faintly. The envelope in my hand felt suddenly too light. I tore it open, empty. By the time I looked up, her car was already backing out of the driveway. She called out through the open window, "You still think you're in control, don't you?" Then she hit the gas. I ran to the back, Noah on my heels. The rear door was rattling, the handle twitching like someone was forcing it. I grabbed the knob, yanked it open, and there she was again, but not Karen. A man in a faded maintenance jacket holding a small lock-picking tool. He froze when he saw me. "Who sent you?" I demanded. He dropped the tool and stammered, I was told to fix a jammed lock." Mrs. Hutchins said. "Get off my property." He didn't argue. He bolted for the street just as Karen's Lexus turned the corner, speeding away. Leah came running, panic etched into her voice. "She staged it. She wanted you to catch someone breaking in so she could claim she was helping again." I watched the empty road, the envelope still fluttering in my hand. "She's repeating the pattern, creating chaos so she can play the hero." I didn't call the police yet. I wanted something better. Something final. The next day, I invited the acting HOA board and a few neighbors for a closure meeting at my house. I didn't tell them why. I just said I had evidence that would end the Karen chapter once and for all. At noon sharp, the doorbell rang. To everyone's surprise, including mine, Karen showed up. She looked freshly pressed, holding another folder of documents. "I heard there was an HOA gathering," she said smoothly. "I'm still a homeowner. I have every right to attend." The vice president frowned but didn't stop her. I gestured toward the living room. Perfect timing. I was just showing everyone something. On the coffee table sat my laptop connected to the TV, displaying live footage from the side and porch cameras. I pressed play. The video showed the locksmith the day before, entering my yard, tampering with the door, admitting on camera that Mrs. Hutchins sent me. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen went rigid. "I didn't," she started. But I wasn't finished. I switched to the next clip. Her Lexus parked 2 streets away, her face visible behind the windshield, watching the break-in unfold. Karen's breath hitched. "That's not what it looks like." "Looks like a setup," Dan said bluntly. Again. She turned on me. "You're manipulating the footage." I pulled a printed timestamp log from my folder. Synced with the city's street cam. "It's authentic." Her composure cracked like thin ice. "You don't get it. I was trying to prove I wasn't the problem. Everyone thinks I'm a criminal. I wanted to show that you're dangerous, that your locks cause chaos." "By paying someone to fake a break-in?" I asked quietly. Her voice rose. "By restoring order. You ruined this neighborhood with your defiance. Someone had to take control again." The vice president shook his head. "Karen, please stop." But she didn't. She turned to the crowd, desperation flooding her face. "Don't you see? Without rules, everything falls apart. Without me, you're all just waiting for something bad to happen." Leah spoke softly from the corner. "Karen, it already happened. You did it." For a long moment, no one moved. The air felt thick, suffocating. Then Noah, who'd been sitting quietly at the top of the stairs, came down holding something in his hand. The same broken key she'd left jammed in our lock that first day. He walked right up to her and held it out. "You dropped this, remember?" She stared at it, her lips trembling. "That's not mine anymore." "Then stop trying to make it fit," he said. "It wasn't cruel. It was just honest, too honest." Karen's face crumpled. She turned without another word, shoved past the neighbors, and walked out the door. The vice president exhaled slowly. "I'll call the authorities. She's violated the restraining order again." "No need," I said quietly. "She's finished. She doesn't need punishment. She needs to see what it feels like to have no door left to unlock." Outside, her Lexus sat idling. She climbed in, sat for a long moment, then drove off, slowly this time, as if the fight had finally drained out of her. For a long while, no one spoke. Then Dan muttered, "Your kid's line should be in a movie." Leah smiled faintly. "It already is. This whole street's been one." That night, I sat on the porch under the soft hum of working streetlights. The neighborhood was quiet again, truly quiet. The broken key sat on the table beside me, gleaming faintly under the porch light. It had started as a symbol of intrusion, then became one of victory, and finally, of closure. Leah joined me with 2 mugs of tea. "You think she's gone for good?" "I think she's lost the only thing she ever valued," I said. "Control. Without it, she's just another neighbor trying to feel important." Noah peeked through the door. "Can we change the lock again? Just in case." I smiled. "Already did." He grinned. "Good. Maybe we should give the new key to the cops instead of the HOA. We all laughed softly. It was the kind of laughter that comes after surviving something absurd, something exhausting, something that finally makes sense when you're far enough away from it. A week later, we received one last letter, official, embossed, signed by the new HOA chair. It read, "All residents are reminded that key access programs have been permanently discontinued. Each home is now fully autonomous. Safety begins with trust." Leah read it aloud and smiled. "Guess you changed policy." "No," I said. "Karen did. She just didn't mean to." I placed the letter next to the broken key, taped both inside a shadow box, and hung it near the door. My own quiet trophy, not of revenge but of survival. Sometimes, when the wind hits the porch just right, the chime of my new keys jingles faintly, and I remember that morning when hers got stuck in my lock. How she called 911, how my son opened the door from the inside and proved what she could never understand. Control isn't power. It's fear dressed as authority. And freedom, real freedom, is the sound of a lock clicking shut because you chose to close it. The neighborhood healed, the lights stayed on, and the only keys left jingling now belonged to the people who truly lived there.